What's all this then?
It's them Chippendale efforts.
You what?
Them dancers.
I'd written this 180-page script I'd written called Among Giants, which was about a group of men in Yorkshire who painted pylons for a living, and it was sort of I guess it was sort of a western, really, and it was really about the dynamics between men.
I mean, look at the state of that. I don't know what you got to smile about. I mean, he's got no willy for starters, has he?
I was lucky enough for Rod Hall, who was an agent at that time, who sent me a script by this unproduced man called Simon Beaufoy, and it was a lovely script, and it was a drama, and it wasn't a comedy at all, and it had a wonderful sense of the interaction between men.
And so we had a chat about it was a sort of a 2 or 3 page outline about, from what I can recall, it was about guys in a gym. And there were 2 or 3 lines about the Chippendales. And he said, this is interesting. And I went, no, it's the Chippendales, it's really old news, bit tacky, why is that interesting? And he said, in Italy, he's an Italian, he said, this would never happen. What has happened to British men that they would humiliate themselves by taking their clothes off in front of women for money? I thought, whoa, that is interesting. And that's how it started. And I said, well, if we can make this film not really about stripping, but about men and unemployment and disenfranchisement, and if we can set it in Sheffield, where I've been living, then it could be amazing.
I met Uberto at a film festival. I think I was going around with Loved Up, and he was going around with Palookaville. And that's the great thing about festivals. You know, you kind of meet other filmmakers, and he said, I loved your film, I've got this script. I said, well, I loved your film. And he said, don't panic, but it's about male strippers, but it's much better than it sounds.
Peter's sensibility was fundamental. Although he saw the 3rd draft of the script, and by that time, Simon and I had sort of cleaned up the farcical elements. It was Peter's sensibility with the actors on the set that maintained the film in that sort of realist vein.
My whole thing was to just try and play it, get the laughs right, but try and play it as a story, as a drama, you know, and not really force the gags at all, just let that come out of the situations. And the script already was on that way, but it had stuff in it where you kind of thought, it had that dole cue scene, you kind of think, well, you know, I put a massive tick by it when I read it, but you kind of think, will that ever quite come off? But the actors kind of just embodied it so much that it works.
In the script, you know, it's less than a quarter of a page long. It's just this small description that Simon had written. But I remember, I think it must have been my 2nd or 3rd audition when I had to go up to Sheffield on a train. I remember reading it again on the train and just belly laughing, and people looking at me on the train, staring, thinking, what's up with him? And I always think that's you know, a great sign. The script was just beautiful.
I trained as a documentary director, and that's how I approach writing a script, is I go out and talk to people, listen. The people on the ground will tell you much more extraordinary stories than ones I could ever make up.
Yeah, it's your HT leads, I reckon. You go at that.
Humour is a really, really undervalued artistic mode, really. I mean, certainly in the north of England, it's a coping strategy. It's a way of dealing with pain. You can tell a story tragically, or you can laugh about it. And it's just as tragic, but you've got a room full of people laughing with you.
How's it going then? You got any work? No, there's not a lot about, is there? Yeah, well, like I say, get some new ones when you get the chance, all right? No, my chuffing pleasure.
Oh, it had to be done in Sheffield, right down to the smaller roles, the extras, the spirit of the place, and just all the backgrounds. You know, it's a great city. The hills are fantastic. You know, we put as much. I was trying to get them on the hills as much as possible, so you get that sort of backdrop of the city. It's a really cinematic place.
You all right, kid? You bastard.
The one thing we struggled with a bit was actually the film is sort of set earlier than we were doing it. You know, I hadn't, even for the time since I'd left Leeds at college and come to London, I was going back saying, oh, you know, you drive over this flyover and it's just like decimated steelworks, it's amazing. And then like Meadowhall's now there, it was like, oh. Really, we just framed it out a lot of that. And it's kind of set in Sheffield a few years earlier than we were really, you know, when the steelworks had just had the plug pulled and when there were lots of disused. We had trouble finding disused steelworks to shoot in. We had to go way out of Sheffield because a lot of that had been knocked down and kind of turned into hypermarkets and stuff.
Initially we had just one trailer for all of us to, you know, to get changed in, to do everything in. So there's not a lot of room, we're bumping into each other, so I'm sorry lads, excuse me, you know, you can't help but get to know each other pretty well in those circumstances. So it was squashy and it's just funny, it's like you're just thrown all together and you have to get on with it. Fortunately, we were all good-natured and enjoyed it.
You don't sing?
No.
You don't dance?
No.
Hope you don't think I'm being nosy, but what do you do?
Well, there is this. Obviously, we had our own fun and our own laughs because you've got, like, you know, 6 boys together messing around on a film set.
Gentlemen, the lunchbox has landed.
You know, it was great that we all got on as well as we did because, you know, that transfers naturally to screen anyway. But I mean, that aside, whether the script was going to work and whether what we were doing was going to translate and be a success, impossible to tell.
There's a misconception that the comedies are a hoot. You know, when you're on the set of a comedy, it's great fun to be there, everyone's having a laugh. Actually, it's terrifying for actors, I think. If it's not funny, you're dead in the water. There's nowhere to hide. And what's more, if it's a comedy that isn't funny and you stand there naked, I mean, you are in a tremendously humiliating position.
Left touch line, 3, 4. Right touch line, 3, 4. Offside trap, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the belt, 3, 4. Now the shoes, 3, 4. Now the socks,
hang on,
4. Carry on.
That were crap.
Well, I think the trick of the script in many ways is that comedy time bomb of like ticking clock. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. Just holding it off. You know, you want to hold a comic premise, squeak it as long as you possibly can.
The first couple of drafts of the script ended without the strip. They ended with us moving outside of the hall and witnessing the reality of the world as it still is.
Well, I remember Uberto in early meetings sort of going, maybe they never strip. And I was like, we've got to see them strip.
And it was David Orkin at Film 4 that said, you cannot keep an audience waiting for a strip for 90 minutes and then not give them the strip at the end.
Okay, ladies and gents, and you boogers up the back there.
The ending, I thought could be amazing. We wanted like 3 days to shoot it. We did it in a day. And I think I wanted like 6 cameras. I think we got 3 cameras, I think.
We're going for the full Monty.
You know, the actors had to go over and over again doing it. But to get the coverage, all we do is we just shot it from different angles and went nearer and nearer to the point of exposure, which really worked for the crowd.
I remember when we did the scene, and I remember it was a full, you know, it was real strip women who went to strip clubs. And it was like, we started at 7 o'clock in the morning, it was like being at a rock concert, you know, the banging on the floor, and they were cheering, and I think they'd all been given a drink, I'm not sure. We were all absolutely drunk, pissed out of our heads, because it was a nightmare. Everybody was terrified. We had to make an announcement at the start, you know, we're going to be shooting this over and over and over again. We have 1 tie for each actor, 1 hat for each actor, 1 shirt, 1 jacket, 1 pair of trousers. You've got to give them back when they end up in the audience. And everybody was very good, but I spent my whole time chasing accessories. And the night before we did this, Tom Wilkinson couldn't pull his pants off, so I had to replace all the Velcro. And the night before we did the strip, I said, come in and just try these pants to check you're happy with them. And he couldn't pull them off. And I was like, oh my God, you know, they're all going to stand there, they're going to be in front of all these women and they're not going to be able to pull their pants off.
The first time I read it, it was a full frontal naked star jump. I remember those words very well. And I remember quite a few actors sort of in casting going, and I remember that I was thinking, well, maybe it could be that the lighting is, they're really backlit so you don't quite see it. Or like people's hands, I was thinking maybe if people's hands go up and they just fortuitously block the bits, you know, the bits. But that would be quite hard to actually realise. And then it just struck me, I think, on a recce in the club, you know, like just do it from behind. Bums are funny, balls are yucky. And that flare of light between Tom Wilkinson's butt cheeks is just like cinema god shining down. Making it, shooting it, I was just wanting to get through the days, you know. It was first time director, we were behind by about a week after 4 days. And it was just making the schedule, managing all these different characters and just each day at a time. It was only in the edit that you started to, it was when people outside the immediate circle start really responding to it, that you when like the editing assistants are like telling you they're crying, syncing up rushes, and then the sound people start looking at it and they're like raving about it, and you start to sort of think, there's something going on here.
Deep down inside, you never know whether something is going to work, and we just got lucky.
I did an early screening for like mates, and they all seemed to love it. Uberto was like, they were all drunk. But the festivals when it popped, you know, it was only at Sundance when it popped, and then you're like, bloody hell, you know, people just love it.
It was nuts, really. There's things you remember, like the Golden Globes, the Oscars, and you're sitting at a table next to Jack Nicholson and Kim Basinger and all these people, and you just kind of like, you know, but you see your heroes. Me and Paul Barber turned up to a pre-Oscar party. We rang the doorbell, and it was answered by Burt Reynolds. And he got hold of me and Paul in a headlock. Just went, I love you guys. And so me and Paul were like this, both under, Burt Reynolds' arm going, that's Burt Reynolds. He's like, yeah, I know. But things like that, over and over and over again, and it was just, this is ridiculous. And it was just ridiculous.